This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so we're going to start off our Intro to Word class by asking a very basic question, which is, what is Microsoft Office Word? It is a software program for word processing. So basically just another way of saying typing up a document. Okay, but of course it's much more versatile than handwriting or by using an old-fashioned typewriter. It is part of a larger group called the Microsoft Office Suite. All right, so you might be familiar with the Microsoft Office package. Typically, if you have access to Word, that means you have access to a couple other Microsoft Office programs, most notably Excel and PowerPoint. All right, so most people have access to these programs through what's called the Microsoft Office Home or Student Edition. All right, and that will come with, like I just said, the big three, which are Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Now, as a word processing program on a computer, as I mentioned, it is much more dynamic, much more robust than handwriting or typing something up on a typewriter. It allows you to type and make changes very quickly. All right, so if you type up an entire document, whether it's 1 page or 50 pages, you can always go back to that document as often as you need to and make as many changes as you want. It easily lets you change the look of your document, so the overall structure, things like your line spacing, your paragraph spacing, the margins, okay, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. All right, you can change those structural components again at any time. And you can easily move text without retyping. This is very basic, but it is very important in terms of Microsoft Word. All right, because again, whether you let's say you type up an entire paragraph or really an entire page for that matter, if you decide that you want to put that section of your text in a different part of the document, you don't have to retype it. You can just move it at any time. Okay. And of course, these are just a few things that make Word so powerful, but it has a lot of other formatting features, some of which we'll cover today and others that we'll cover in future Word classes. So in this class, the exercise is going to introduce you to Microsoft Word 2019. So this is the version we're using for our classes, okay? And for that matter, all of our Office classes here are taught using the 2019 versions of those programs. That's okay as long as you have access to 2007 or later. You'll find that whatever you learn in this version can be easily applied to those other versions. All right, so once we open up Word, I'm going to introduce you to the interface or the window. Okay, so um, just so you can become kind of become acquainted with the lay of the land. Okay, the work area and where all the tools are located. We're going to create a document, save it, edit it, save it again and again and again, and we're going to highlight and format text to change the size, style, and font using our tabs and toolbars. We're also going to cut and paste and copy and paste. We're going to use spell and grammar check to correct errors, and we're going to make a list with bullets or numbers. All right, now before we jump into Word, I do just want to quickly review the keyboard. All right, we don't do this for every class, but for this class in particular, because Word relies on the use of the keyboard so heavily, I think it's good to just review some of the more important keys, especially the ones that are relevant to Microsoft Word. All right. Now, the keyboard you're seeing on the screen right now is a PC keyboard, so keep that in mind. If you have a Mac, it's going to look a little bit different. Also, if you have a laptop, it might look a little bit different from this one, but it will have the same keys. The only thing you might not have on a laptop is the numerical keypad on the right here, but everything else will likely be on that laptop keyboard. Okay, so first of all, of course, we're going to be typing up using letters, which are found right here in this main part of the keyboard. But just remember that while the keys show letters in uppercase format, when you press the letter, it's going to show up in lowercase on the page, on the screen. Okay, so again, if I press the letter A, it shows an uppercase A, but it's going to show up in lowercase on the page. And we'll talk about how to make it uppercase in just a second. Above the letters, you have your number keys, 1 through 0, if you need numbers at any time. You'll notice number keys have symbols on them as well. Okay, we'll talk about that in just a second. All right. Now, another important key is the space bar. So whether we are handwriting or typing, it is customary to have a space between words and a space between sentences. So that's what the space bar there is for. press the space bar and you'll get a space. The tab key, okay? We probably won't be using this one today, but it is worth noting because, again, it is often customary to indent the first line of a paragraph. All right, you may know this already. When we type in paragraphs, oftentimes the first sentence of that paragraph is kind of indented further to the right than the other sentences, okay? And we get that indentation by using the tab key. The backspace key. All right, we typically use this for erasing. All right, and we could erase text right to left or backwards. So backwards, backspace. We can also use the delete key to erase text, but in the opposite direction. So this will erase the text from the beginning to the end of the word, for example. So from left to right. The control key, again, won't be using this one today, but it is worth noting, especially because we will use it next week in Word Essentials. The control key on a PC allows you to implement a number of what we call keyboard shortcuts. All right, a lot of different operations can be performed with just your keyboard. You don't need the mouse. And the control key is what we need to perform those operations. Again, we're going to circle back to the control key more next week. The caps lock key. Okay, so let's talk about uppercase letters. So when you press the caps lock key, it will lock all of your letters in uppercase format. So unlike what I said before, if I press the letter A, but the caps lock key is engaged, I will get an uppercase A. And for that matter, as long as the caps lock key is turned on, every time I type a letter, it's going to show up in uppercase. Okay, so that means that every letter in a sentence or in a paragraph, whatever, will show up in uppercase format. However, we don't usually use it. We don't usually type this way. All right, things that show up in all capital letters tend to sound very urgent. Okay, and we don't want to always convey urgency. That's not always the point. So I always kind of discourage students from using caps lock when you need capital letters. Because usually when we need capital letters, we just need a couple, okay, one or two at a time. So for example, when you're typing your name, the first letter of your first name is capitalized, but everything else is lowercase. So instead of using the caps lock key, it's better to use the shift key. All right, when you hold down the shift key and press any key, or in this case, when you press a letter, you'll get the uppercase format of that letter, but then it will immediately go back to lowercase once you let go of the shift key. Okay, the shift key, another benefit to using this or getting in the habit of using this is that it will also give you the characters you see on other keys. So, a couple things here. When we look at those keys on the keyboard, you'll notice that some of them have two things on them. The general term for all of these is characters. So whether we're talking about letters, numbers, or things like $signs and percentage symbols, those are all called characters. Now, any key that has two characters on it, in order to get the character at the top of the key, you need to hold down the shift key and press the designated key. So for example, if I need a $sign, I would hold down shift and press the 4 key. All right, a couple more here. The arrow keys on the right. You're going to, as I mentioned before, we're always able to move through our document at any time, left and right, up and down, as often as we need to. The arrow keys is one way to do that. We can also use our mouse, and we'll explore the difference between those two in a few minutes. All right, so without any further delay, now that we covered the keyboard, let's go ahead and jump into Microsoft Word. So on my end, I'm using Windows 11, okay? If you're using a different version of Windows, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to be launching Microsoft Word from my Windows 11 taskbar down at the bottom here. Again, for those of you following along virtually, you can launch Word from whatever access point you typically use. That's completely up to you. All right, so when I open up Word, the first screen we come to is what's called the Start screen, and you're going to see something similar to this in all the other Office applications. The Start screen contains two main things. On the right side is a template gallery. All right, Microsoft Office gives us built-in templates. These are specific types of documents, and they allow us to create that kind of document much faster. All right, these are typically reserved for things that are more graphically rich, like flyers, brochures, um, cards, okay, things like that, that are not so much traditional documents, but more, like I said, I like to think of them as graphically rich or graphically oriented. All right, because those kinds of things take more time to build, so these give you a place to start. All right, but for today, of course, we're going to be building one from scratch, and we'll get there in 1 second. Before I click on this, I just want to bring your attention to the left side of the start screen where we have a jump list where it says recent, okay? As you start to save Word documents, they will start to show up in this list every time you relaunch Microsoft Word, and that's there because it allows you to jump back into one of those documents if you need to work on it some more. All right, hence the term jump list. And by the way, I should mention that, remember that when we save a Word document, we call that file a document. Okay, that's exactly what Word calls them. If you've ever seen the file extension .doc or .docx, that is the Microsoft Word file format. All right, so now that we covered all background, let's go to the very first template that says blank document and click on it. All right, so we open up that blank document and it gives us, just as the name implies, a blank document. So this is where you would go to start a new document from scratch. All right, now we're looking at the piece of paper on the screen here. We can see the top left and right sides of the page with a light gray background underneath of it. Now, I am kind of zoomed in on my page. So if you're looking at yours right now and it seems a bit further away, that's okay, just because I zoomed in. All right, just so you could see it better. And of course, there is a bottom edge of the page, which we'll see in just a minute. But what I want to focus on at this moment is, well, two things. First of all, the mouse cursor. As I bring the mouse down over the page, you'll notice that I get what's called the I beam. Looks like a letter I. Okay, that means that we're able to type in this area. More importantly, on the page itself is that blinking line where you see here, and that's called the insertion point. Okay, first of all, when it's blinking like that, that means the page is activated and we can just start typing. More importantly, the insertion point tells us where the text is going to fall when we start typing. So oftentimes, we need to move the insertion point back and forth depending on what change we need to make and where it needs to be made. Okay, so if I type out a whole sentence and I decide I want to change the first word of that sentence, I would have to move the insertion point back to that first word first and then make my changes. And we're gonna do an example of that very shortly. So you get used to that back and forth with the insertion point. And again, that can be done by using either your mouse or the arrow keys on your keyboard. Now to the right side of the page, there is a vertical scroll bar here that allows you to scroll up and down the document as needed. And if I scroll all the way down, you will now see the bottom edge here. And if I had more than one page, it would just keep scrolling through every subsequent page until I reach the end of the document. For now, however, I'm going to scroll back up to the top to get myself back to the beginning. Now, underneath the page, there's a light gray bar here spanning the width of the screen left to right, and that's called the status bar. On the left side of that status bar, you'll see a page count. Next to that is a word count. And over to the right side of the status bar, some quick ways to change the view of our document. But more importantly is a zoom level. So this is how I zoomed in. So if at any time you ever want to zoom in onto your document or zoom out from your document, this is the fastest and easiest way to do it, to use the zoom level over here. You could just click and drag or use the minus sign to zoom out, plus sign to zoom in. Now, as we go above the page, we come to the menu up here that holds all the tools available to us in Microsoft Word. Okay, and first of all, we tend to call tools commands, and all the commands here are organized by tabs. All right, so this menu is called the ribbon, and this menu design you're going to find in the other Microsoft Office programs as well. So as I mentioned before, all of the commands in the ribbon are organized by these tabs, beginning with the Home tab, which is already selected. Notice the outline around it. They're basically like tabs in your filing cabinet, right? Like folder tabs. That's what this is modeling. So you'll see I also have an Insert tab, a Design tab, a Layout tab, References, Mailings, Review, View, and Help. So as I click on a tab, I get a different set of commands for each tab. Now I'm going to go back and click on the Home tab. Now the Home tab, think of it as your home base. It has the commands you're likely to need most often for a basic document. So the idea is that you don't need to leave the Home tab too much. Once you get into more specialized documents like newsletters, brochures, things like that, that's when you kind of need to start exploring the other tabs more. Okay, but for today's purposes, we're really going to be in the Home tab for almost the whole thing. Okay, now the commands in each tab are further broken down into what we call groups. So for example, I'm in the Home tab and I have a clipboard group, a font group, paragraph, styles, and editing. So the name of the tab followed by the name of the group. All right, that system is there to help you locate the command you need. But remember, if I ever tell you to click on a command and you're not sure that it's the right one, just point at the icon in your ribbon, leave your pointer there for 1 second, and a little tag will pop up telling you what it is and what it does. All right, a couple more things to review, and then we're going to get started with our exercise. To the left of your Home tab is your File menu. All right, that's where we go to get to the backstage operations, such as creating a new document, opening an existing document, saving our current document, and printing our current document. Now, if you're on the screen, we can go up to the top left, click on the back arrow to go back to the main work screen. All right, last but not least, in the very top left corner, above your File menu, above your Home tab, there's what we call the Quick Access toolbar. Okay, this allows you to add additional access points to your favorite commands so you can get to them faster. All right, there are a couple ways to add commands to that Quick Access toolbar. The fastest way is just to find the command in your ribbon, right-click it, and then from the right-click menu, select Add to Quick Access Toolbar. And that way, that command that you like to use all the time is just one click away, and you don't have to drill down through the tabs and through the groups to get to it. All right, so remember, just a quick reminder for my virtual students, if you have any questions during class, you can submit them to the GoToMeeting chat. Just click on the chat icon in GoToMeeting, and then type your question into the chat box provided, click send, and I'll respond to it as soon as I can. All right, so we're looking at the page. We see our insertion point is blinking. So we're just gonna go ahead and start typing. Now what I'm gonna do now is type in a couple short sentences, and then we're gonna talk about that paragraph we create in a little more detail, and then we're going to start making some changes. All right, so bear with me for one moment while I type this out, and then we're going to circle back to it. All right, sorry for the brief pause there, folks. Okay. I tried to fix something on my end. So let's go ahead. I'm going to start typing. So this sentence is going to be the following. By mixing simple ingredients, I can make something delicious. Okay, now I'm going to put a period here. So a couple things. The comma that you see here, the comma is found to the right of the letter M on your keyboard. So I have a comma and then space there. And the period at the end here is to the right of the comma key. So I put a period and then a space after the period. Now my next sentence will be, and remember I'm using the shift key here, give me that capital A, okay? Anytime is a good time. Bake cookies, share with friends and family, period. All right, so for those of you who might be following along, I'll give you a few seconds to catch up, and then we're going to talk about this paragraph, and then we're going to make some changes to it. So I'm going to be turning off my mic for just a few seconds. I'll be right there. Okay, so first of all, as we were typing left to right, you'll notice that after the word to here, after cookies to, my text went down to the next line. Okay, now I didn't press any key to bring it down there. That's called text wrap. Okay, as you're typing left to right and you run out of space on the right side, Word will automatically drop down your text to the next available line space. And again, that's called text wrap. Zoom back out. Okay, now there are some instances though where of course we do want to start a new line at any at any point in the document, and we typically do that to start a new paragraph. So when you want to manually start a new line, that's when you need to press the enter key, which I'll do right now, but then I'm going to put it back. So I press enter, and you notice that the insertion point drops down to the next line, back to the left side. Now I'm going to put it back to where it was. Okay. Now also, speaking of the insertion point, notice how the insertion point followed as I typed left to right, and it's now at the end after the period. But sometimes we need to relocate the insertion point to make changes, and we're going to do that in just a second. I just want to mention one more thing, and that is the margins. So as I was typing left to right, notice I'm not starting on the left edge of the page, and I'm not going all the way to the right edge. For that matter, I'm also not starting at the very tippy top of the page. That's because around all sides of your page, top, bottom, left, right, you have built-in margins. Those empty spaces, okay, those are called margins, and they're there on purpose. They're there to keep your text kind of nice and neat and prevent it from spilling over the edges of the page, which would make it less presentable, less legible. All right, even typically when we handwrite on lined paper, there are margins on those as well, okay, for the same reason. So that's how the program knows where to start and where to end with the text, going both left to right and up and down. All right, so let's just do a very quick, simple exercise just to get ourselves comfortable using, or should I say, relocating the insertion point. Suppose I want to make a change here where it says anytime is a good time. I want to change the word good to great. So I could do this in a couple of ways, but no matter what, I pretty much have to move the insertion point over there before I make any change because I need to isolate it. All right, I need to tell the program what to change, where to change it. Okay, so I'm going to move the insertion point by simply taking my mouse. Okay, again, this is called the I-beam, and clicking after the D in good. One single click, and you'll notice that I moved it after the word good. Now it's blinking right there. Now, like as I mentioned before, you can use your arrow keys as well, up, down, left, and right. You could even hold it to go a bit faster, but the mouse is definitely, relocating it with the mouse is definitely faster if you're kind of moving line to line, okay? But if you need to be more precise, for instance, if you only need to move one space, then the arrow key might be a better bet because it's a little easier than getting that I-beam just right. Okay, so with all that said, I relocated the insertion point after the word good. So now I can just erase the word good and replace it with the word great. So one way I can do this is just use the backspace key on the keyboard. All right, every time you press the backspace key, you'll erase one character at a time until that word is gone. And then I could just type in the word great. Okay, very simple. Now I'd like to show you another way a bit faster. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the word good back onto the page. So right now I'm basically showing you two things. First is something called undo. Okay. In your quick access toolbar, you'll find this command. In that top left corner, remember up here, follow my mouse pointer above the file and home, above the file menu in the home tab, you'll see your quick access toolbar, that left turning arrow, that's your undo command. Every time you click it, it will go back one step in the process of creating this document. Okay, so I had to press it a few times until I got the word good back onto the page. So what that means is if you kept pressing undo, eventually you'd get it back to just a blank document, okay? Because it's just gonna undo it, right? It's gonna go back each and every step you took. So this is a great tool to know about because if you make a mistake, all right, or you change your mind, that's the easiest way to get it back to the way you want it. So even if I do something like erase the whole thing, I don't have to panic because I could just undo and it puts it back, okay? So let's return to the word good. I still want to change it to great. So a faster way would be to just change it as a block instead of character by character. So before, instead of using the backspace key, what I could do first is select the text. And this is something we're going to be doing all throughout class and really all throughout our other Word classes. What do I mean by selecting text? I mean highlighting it. So by using your I-beam here, your mouse pointer, if you click, hold, and drag with your left mouse button, you can select text. And that's our way of isolating a specific portion of text to then make a change to it. So if I go to the word good, I can select just the word good like this. All right, you can go right to left, but left to right tends to be easier. And a little tip, if you double click on any word, you will select just that word, no more, no less. So that's just a slightly faster way of selecting one word. So I double clicked on good, now the word good is selected. Now I can either press backspace or delete on the keyboard, either one will elicit the same result, which is to erase that word as a block instead of letter by letter. Now I could type in the word great. It looks like I also deleted the space after good, so I'm just gonna hit the space bar again to put a space between great and time. All right. Now, after all this hard work so far, I'm going to go ahead and just save my document. All right, so this is a good time to review saving because we always want to save as often as possible so we don't lose any of our work. So because this is the first time saving this document, we need to do what's called a save as. So I'm going to go to my file menu, and in that on the left side of the screen, in that blue pane, I'm going to click on save as. All right, and I can choose a folder to save this in. So under save as here, I'm going to click on browse. And in this dialog box, you'll see that it defaults to my Windows Documents folder, okay, which is likely how your version of Word will be set up as well, unless you made a change. Okay, now you can put it in whatever folder you want. You don't have to save it here. You would, of course, just go to your navigation menu on the left and select whatever folder you want for this document. But just for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to keep it here in the Documents folder. So the next thing I have to look at is the file name. I'm going to change the name. Right now, it's just kind of filling in the first few words I typed into the document. So I'm going to erase that. And instead, I'm going to call it Word Practice. All right. After I gave it that file name, I don't really have to look at this, but I just want to mention the Save As Type drop down here. By default, when you save a Word document, it will save it as a Word document, okay, just as it says there. Like I mentioned before, the file extension .doc or .docx, okay, that's a Word document file format. That's what it's going to save it in unless you specify otherwise using the other options in the dropdown, okay, for example, a PDF. Okay, I just want to mention that now because we will revisit that again next week in Word Essentials, okay, the that term extension and the save as type dropdown here. All right, so with all those things addressed, I can now go to the bottom right and click Save. All right, so I still want to make a few changes to this very short paragraph. The first thing I'd like to do is I'm going to be visiting, I'm in the Home tab, I'm going to be visiting the font group here. All right, so remember, we have all these group names. We're going to be sticking to the font group for now. We're not going to explore every single command, just the ones that I think are used most often. All right, and for the purposes of Word certification, the ones that those who created the assessment think you should know. So first things first, I'd like to maybe make my text a little bit bigger. So in Microsoft Word, when you start a blank document, again, there's that term by default, it's going to be size 11. So if you look in your font group, you will see an 11 here in this box. But you could change that size at any time. So I just want to make this a little bit bigger. Maybe I want to make it 14. So what I'm going to do is, before I can make that a 14, I first need to select the text. That way the program knows what to change, what to apply that formatting change to. So we could select this paragraph by going left to right, and then just moving down to select the next sentence as a block, okay? And it would work the same way if we had 5, 10, 20 pages. You could just keep selecting down, down, down as far as you need to. Now, another little tip, before I showed you the double click to select one word, okay, a triple click, 1, 2, 3, will select an entire paragraph. No more, no less. So just another little trick to familiarize yourself with. So now that I've selected this paragraph, I can go up to the font group to that font size and make it 14. You can type into the box, or you could type into the box and then press enter, or you could click on the drop down arrow here and select 14 from the list provided. Maybe I also want to change the font type, okay? So once again, I need to select the text first. It's already selected, but just for the sake of repetition, I'm going to select it again by triple clicking it. Then I'm going to go back up to the font group, this time to the font drop down here where it says Calibri. Again, Calibri is your default font that you'll get with any new document, but we're going to change that font for this particular document. So I'm going to click on the drop down, and I'm looking for one called Times New Roman. Now, all the fonts, of course, are listed alphabetically. Also note that if you point at them, you'll get a preview of what they look like on the page there. But I'm going to scroll down to the T's to get to Times New Roman. I'm going to click on it, and there it is. Now I'm going to just click outside of this highlight to get rid of the highlight, because I don't need to make any wholesale changes to that paragraph anymore, at this point anyway. All right, now also in your font group are what I like to call the emphasis commands. All right, you'll see 3 icons here, B, I, and U. All right, they stand for bold, italic, and underline. These are 3 different ways to emphasize or maybe clarify points made in your document. Okay, so for example, suppose I want to stress or emphasize the word delicious. I want you to know these are really delicious. Okay, so one way I could do that is by using one of these commands to kind of draw your attention to that text. So the first thing I have to do is select the word delicious. Since I'm only selecting one word, I can double click, Okay, and then I'm going to go up to that font group, and in this case, I'm going to use the B for bold. I clicked on the B, and now look at the word delicious, and it's in a slightly thicker, darker font. Okay, it's a bold font. Now keep in mind, a lot of these commands are like on and off switches. If I change my mind at any time, I could, well, one thing I could do is undo, technically, but I could also just select the word again, click on the B again, and just turn it off. Okay, so it's like an on and off switch. All right, maybe I want to stress the word simple, so you know that these ingredients are very, very simple. All right, things you have around the house already. So once again, I need to select the word simple first. I could do that by clicking and dragging or by doing a double click. This time I'm going to use underline. So we're going to go up to the font group, click on the icon with the U in it, and now the word simple is underlined. All right, last but not least is italic. Italic is a little bit different. Italic is probably one you're going to see most often amongst these three, okay? That's because italics are not only meant to they're meant to be read in a specific way, okay? So, for example, the word anytime, excuse me, anytime. So first, let me put it in italics. So I'm going to select the word anytime, go up to the font group, click on the I for italics, and now you'll see that that text is on a slight angle, and that's what we call italics. Now, it's also meant to be read in a very specific way. So without the italics, it would be read like anytime is a great time to bake cookies, or I'm sorry, anytime is a great time to bake cookies to share with friends and family. But if I put in italics, I'm supposed to read it like anytime is a great time to bake cookies to share with friends and family. So it's just a way of actually verbally emphasizing the word in addition to visually emphasizing the word. All right. So again, 3 different ways to emphasize or clarify points made in your document. Underline, by the way, I should mention, we don't often use this in bodies of text. Usually underlined you'll see for headings like titles, or if we have a lot of hyperlinks in our text, because nowadays we're often linking to things in documents, those are underlined by default. So you want to limit your use of underline so people don't get confused. All right, just wanted to mention that. But I just wanted to show you the underline just for the purposes of example. All right. Now, of course, there are other commands in that font group, like font color, all right, text highlight. So I encourage you to explore these as you're practicing with Word. But for now, I just wanted to review basically those 5 commands: your font size, your font, bold, italic, and underline. Because again, those are kind of the big ones from this group to make sure that you know. All right, so now that we've covered the font group commands, I'd like to move over to talk about some of the paragraph group commands. All right, so for this, I want to do this actually on a separate page. So we are going to, in a second, insert what's called a page break. Before we do that, I want to review a couple things. First of all, remember, I talked about text wrap, how we type left to right, and if we run out of space, the text drifts down to the next line by itself automatically. We don't have to press a key to do that. But if we want to manually start a new line, we can press the Enter key, and it will bring your insertion point down to the next line, back to the left. Okay. Similar thing happens with pages in Microsoft Word. As we're typing up a document, top to bottom, if we run out of space at the bottom of the page, all right, Word will give us a second page automatically. We just keep typing and Word just keeps giving us new pages when needed. We don't have to manually create that page. However, sometimes we want to insert a new page before we've reached the end of the one we're on, like we do right now. So in this case, I would need to manually insert a page break, just like sometimes we need to manually insert new lines or paragraphs. All right. So with that said, the next thing I'd like to review real quick is the insertion point. You want to make sure your insertion point is at the end of the paragraph after the period. So family, period, and then your insertion point should be after that period. Why do I say that? Because if your insertion point is, let's say it's before the word anytime here, if I press a page break, it's going to take any text after the insertion point along with it. Just like if I press the enter key, it's going to take that text with it. Okay, so that's why we want to make sure that our insertion point is at the end of the paragraph after the period, so there's nothing else after it. So if it's not there, just click after the period to move it there. Once your insertion point is in that location, we can now insert a page break. So for this, we need to leave the Home tab and go to the Insert tab in our ribbon. So follow my mouse. I'm going up to the Insert tab, clicking on it. And the very first group to the left is the Pages group. And you'll see a command called Page Break. Go ahead and click on Page Break, and you will get a page 2. And once again, my insertion point is set up at the top of that page on the left margin. Top margin, left margin. Now, if it's easier, which I think it is, you can scroll down so only page 2 is within your view, like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and start typing in some more text. So on this page, I want to create a list. So in the first paragraph, we were talking about baking cookies. I now want to create a list of my 5 favorite cookies. All right, so it's going to be a little bit different this time. We're typing out a list, and we're going to use some different features to emphasize or kind of reinforce the items in that list. So first, let's put a title for the list. That title is going to be my 5 favorite cookies, and we'll just leave it at my 5 favorite cookies. All right, now this is a title. One thing we often do with titles is we like to center them on the page. So up until this point, our insertion point always, if we start a new line, it ends up on the left margin, okay? But we might want to take this text and put it in the horizontal center of the page, which means we need to basically change the way it's aligned, okay? So we're going to change it from left alignment to center alignment. So once again, before we can do that, we need to select the text. So you can go ahead and do that. Now I'm going to go back to the Home tab, and we're going to come to this paragraph group, where we go to adjust things like line and paragraph spacing, indentation, and alignment. Okay, now in the paragraph group, you're going to see a set of 4 icons here. Each one has 4 lines in it. We have align left, center, align right, and justify. In this case, we want to click on center, so it's aligned center. And now I'm just going to click outside that highlight to get rid of the highlight. All right, and one thing I should mention real quick. Notice, by the way, the text here is still size 14 Times New Roman. So once again, the changes we made up here, they will apply to everything after it, after this point. So keep that in mind. When you make a change to something, if you add anything after it, those changes will typically stay in effect as you continue to type. So that's why even on the second page, this title is still Times New Roman, size 14. Okay, and to that point, I'm going to press the Enter key. Notice where my insertion point is after the word cookies. I'm going to press the Enter key, and it's going to stay centered. Notice where the insertion point is. It's in the center of the page because, again, if we add anything after we've made formatting, changed our settings, our formatting settings, those settings will stay in place unless we manually change them to something else. So at this point, I'm going to bring it back to the left margin. So again, I pressed enter. My insertion point is now on the next line space here. But to bring it back to the left margin, I need to go back up to the paragraph group and click on Align Left. Notice it moves back to the left margin. Now I'm going to type in my 5 favorite cookies, starting with oatmeal. Now, typically a list, we arrange the items vertically, right? Each item is on its own line. So that means I'm going to be pressing the Enter key between each item. Chocolate chip, enter. Sugar, enter. Ginger snap, enter. Snickerdoodle. And I'll stop right there. And by the way, notice I am capitalizing the first letter of each item. Okay. Okay, so before we start making some changes to this, we should probably update our work, update our document. So I'm going to do a quick save. All right, a couple of ways to do this. In your quick access toolbar in the top left corner, you may have a disk icon. That's a quick save. Otherwise, you can go to your file menu and just click save on the left side. You don't have to click save as like before. Just click save to quickly update your document. Okay, so we're still working in this paragraph group. So the first thing I'd like to do is change the order of these items. Oftentimes in the real world, when we create a list, we like to alphabetize it because it just makes it easier to organize things, and we know where to look for certain items depending on what they start with. So Word actually allows you to rearrange or reorder the sequence of text that you select. And what it does by default, it's going to look at the beginning of each paragraph, okay, the letter at the beginning of each paragraph, and then alphabetize it accordingly. And we pressed enter between each item, so technically these are 5 individual paragraphs, okay? So the first thing is to select all the items in the list. So I'm going to select oatmeal. Now this time, there's no double click or triple click option, so we need to do it all in one motion. You can't let go of the left mouse button until every item is selected. So what I do is I select the first item left to right. I bring my mouse cursor out to the right, like this, pretty far away from all the text. And then I just go down and it will select each additional line or each additional item as a block. I'll do it one more time. Left to right, bring the mouse cursor out, and then just move down. So now I can tell Word to sort these alphabetically. So let's go up to our paragraph group. You will see an icon with an AZ in it. I'm pointing at it right now. It's called sort. I'm going to click on that icon. It's going to open a separate dialog box that says sort text. Now, as I mentioned before, it's going to sort it by the paragraphs. You can change that, but typically this is what you're going to use. So we don't need to make any changes to these options. All we have to do is go to the bottom right and click OK. Now it's sorted alphabetically. Now you can leave that list selected for now, but if you accidentally unselected or deselected, you could just select it again. All right. Now the next thing I'd like to do to this list is kind of make it more of a proper list. So another thing we often do when we create lists in real life is we like to enumerate them perhaps. All right, we like to either give each item a bullet point or like a dash, or a number. We like to create a numbered list just to help us kind of more easily identify each individual item in the list. So I've already selected the list, that's step one. And up in your paragraph group, okay, remember, we have these two levels of icons, right? The top level in your paragraph group in the top left, you'll see three dots above a line left. Point at it, it will say bullets. And just like sorting, what this will do is just put bullets bullets before the beginning of each paragraph, or in this case, before the beginning of each list item. So just click on the bullet icon itself, and now you have a bulleted list. You'll notice that there is a drop down arrow next to the bullet icon. That's for other types of bullets in case you don't want the solid bullets. But just to keep things simple, I'm just going to leave it as is. All right, if you open that drop down, you can just click anywhere outside of it to close it. Now I want to talk about this bulleted list for 1 minute because a few things happen when we bullet items in Microsoft Word. First of all, remember the idea of things staying on as we continue to type after it. If I create a new line after sugar, let's say, with my enter key, it's going to give me a new bullet because it's assuming that I want to keep adding to this bulleted list. All right, it would do the same thing between existing items as well. All right, let me undo. I'm going to undo twice to get rid of both extra bullets. Good. So, but sometimes we want to kind of, after a bulleted list like this, we want to return to normal paragraphs. So there are a couple ways to do that. One way, well, in either case, the first thing you'll do is press the enter key to start a new line. Then you can either go up to your paragraph group, click on the bullet icon to turn it off, and you'll see that the insertion point goes back to the left, or you can press the enter key again. Either method will give you the same result. So again, you'll first create a new line, and either press enter again or click on that bullet icon to go back to normal paragraphs. All right. Another thing I want to mention is that when you add bullets, you may have noticed that each of these items was further indented to the right. Okay. If you, that's something it does by itself, but you have a little bit of control over that. You can move them back to the left or further to the right if you want. And we can control that using, in the paragraph group, the decrease indent and increase indent commands. You'll see a left arrow here and a right arrow. So if I want to go back to the left margin, kind of where it started out, I can click on decrease indent and move it back to the left. Or, like I said, you could also increase. It's really up to you. All right, and then one last thing I want to mention, but we're not really going to focus on this one too much, is that it does change the spacing between the paragraphs. All right, we had a wider space before, now it's more narrow. That's something we're going to circle back to next week because that's a little more complex. So we're going to talk about that in Word Essentials next week. Okay, so with all that said, we have a bulleted list. It looks good. Suppose we want to change the bullets to numbers because that's another kind of list we can do in Microsoft Word. Well, we don't need to get rid of the bullets and then apply numbers. We could just replace the bullets with numbers, just swap them out. So again, the first step would be to select the entire list. Notice the bullets are not highlighted. That's okay. That's just how it works. Now that I've selected every item in the list, I can go back up to the paragraph group, and this time go up to the icon that has a 1, 2, 3 in it. That's numbering. Okay, I'm pointing at it right now. I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of bullets. And again, just like we talked about before, those settings will stay turned on. So if I press enter after sugar, I'll get a 6. Unless I press enter again or turn off the numbering icon to go back to normal paragraphs. All right, I'm going to do another quick save. to update my document. All right, so now we talked about the font group. We talked about the paragraph group. Again, in the paragraph group, another good command to know about is your line and paragraph spacing right here. But this is something we will definitely get to next week in Word Essentials. All right. So we talked about the font group and the paragraph group. Now I want to kind of move over back to the left to the clipboard group, the very first one here. That's where we go to cut, copy, and paste. Now, for those of you familiar with cut, copy, paste, you may know that there are several ways to do this on a PC, but for the sake of consistency, we're going to be using the ribbon, okay? So suppose we're going to talk about cut and paste first, and then we're going to move on to copy and paste. Suppose I want to move this list to page 1. I changed my mind. All right, I want to move the title and the list all onto page 1. So when we cut and paste, it is a 4-step process. The first thing we have to do is select the portion of text that we want to cut. So that's going to be the title, left to right. Remember this, we have to do this in one motion. So I'm going to select the title, left to right, and then just move down to select all the items in the list. Step 2 is to go ahead and cut it. So I'm going to go up to my clipboard group, follow my mouse, and click on the cut icon. Okay, now it looks like it's deleted, but it's not. It's in a kind of background area known as the clipboard, hence the clipboard group. Step 3 is to decide where it needs to be moved to. And we do that by relocating the insertion point. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back up to page 1. I'm going to click after the word family, after the period. Notice that's where the insertion point is now. And then we're going to press enter to start a new line. And that is where the list is going to fall. Okay. So now that I've given it a new location, I move on to the 4th and final step, which is to go ahead and paste it. So now I'm going to go back up to the clipboard group, and you'll see paste, but you don't want to click on the drop down. You want to click on the actual paste picture, the clipboard icon. And there it is. So that's cut and paste. All right, very simple, very easy, fast way to move text without having to retype it. All right, now let's quickly review copy and paste, which is basically the same exact process, just a different result. So suppose I want to take all of this text, the paragraph included, so everything on this page, and I want to create a duplicate of it on page 2. So I have it in 2 places. Okay, this is a copy and paste. So step 1 is the same. I need to select the portion of text that I want to copy, which in this case is everything. So let's just practice that selecting. I'm going to select the first sentence, left to right, keep my mouse pointer out to the right like this, and then just go down, down, down until I've selected everything on this page. Step 2, instead of clicking on cut, we're going to click on copy. So we're going to go up to the clipboard group and click on the copy icon. Notice this time the text stays there. That's because we're just copying it. We're leaving it here and putting a copy somewhere else. Step 3, tell the program where to put that copy portion of text. So once again, we do that by moving the insertion point. So I'm going to scroll back down to page 2. All right, this can be a little bit tricky, so follow my lead. You'll notice if I point in the margins of the page, okay, notice the arrow. You don't want to click with the arrow. You want to make sure that you kind of move into the page until you see the I-beam, like this. Then you can go ahead and click, and now my insertion point is in the text area of the page. So again, If you see the arrow, just move it to the right until you see the I-beam and then click. One single click, there's my insertion point. Now I can move on to the final step, which is to paste it. So I'll go back up to the clipboard group and click on the paste icon. All right, now you may be wondering, why do I have a 6 through 10? So this may happen on your end, okay? That's because in computer programs, when we paste things, depending on the program we're using, we can often paste them either as a strictly a copy or with some slight variations. Okay, sometimes we have different options as to how we want to paste something. So what Word did in this case was it pasted it as what it calls a continued list. So it's assuming that I want to keep the numbering going from 1 through 5 to 6 through 10 on this page. But suppose I want this to be 1 through 5 as well. That means I need to paste it as a new list. I need Word to treat it as a brand new list. So you'll notice once you paste it, there's a little drop down here, a little mini toolbar. That's your paste options. If you click on that, you'll see a few options here. The second one is new list. I'm going to click on it and now I have 1 through 5. I'm going to do a quick save again by going up to my quick access toolbar in the top left corner and clicking on the save icon. All right, so that's cut, copy, paste, very simple. Now, in a second, we're going to do a spell check, and then we are just about done already. I just want to, so just to kind of recap, we visited the font group, we visited the paragraph group, and just now the clipboard group for these very basic yet highly functional commands that we've been using. We also have the styles group. We don't really use this one in our classes. These are kind of, the styles options are kind of quick ways to change sort of the styles. Basically, styles include a number of settings in one option. Things like spacing between your lines, the size of your font, the font type, etc., etc. So they're kind of like built-in options that you can just click on rather than changing things one by one. Okay, but I think it's more beneficial to you to show you how to change them yourself for full customization. Okay. Also, we didn't visit the editing group on the right here. This one we will touch on next week in Word Essentials. Find, replace, and select. Okay, so let's talk about spelling and grammar check. I'm going to just purposely make a spelling error. All right, and we can talk about spelling and grammar check. And so if you have any errors, you can first follow my instructions and then apply them to your unique situation. So you'll notice that I have a red squiggly underline under what is supposed to be delicious. Okay, if you have any red squiggly underlines, those are spelling errors. Or in some cases, what Word thinks is a spelling error, but it might not be. We'll talk about that in a second. So basically, as you type, Word will keep track of spelling and grammar errors. Okay, and then you could always review it at the end and correct them as needed. So to do this, we need to go to our Review tab in the ribbon. So I just clicked on the Review tab up here in the ribbon. Now, what I always advise patrons is to move your insertion point back to the beginning of the document. That's because spell check is going to start wherever the insertion point is. So I just find it easier to follow along with if it's actually at the beginning and completes at the actual end of the document. Again, you don't have to do this. I just think it's a bit easier to follow along with. So I clicked at the beginning, and now I'm going to go up to that Review tab to the very left side in the proofing group and click on the very first command, spelling and grammar. So now on the right side of the screen, you will see a proofing pane. And here's where you make your adjustments if needed, okay? The box at the top is going to show you the incorrect spelling, okay, the way it's currently spelled in your document. Under that is a list of spelling suggestions. Sometimes you'll get just one, sometimes you'll get a few, and they give you dictionary definitions so you can make sure that you're choosing the right spelling. All right. Sometimes you won't get any, depending on how badly that word is misspelled. In those cases, you just have to kind of fix it yourself. You have to figure it out. All right. But usually, Word is pretty good at guessing what it is you're actually trying to spell. So it's very simple. Notice it's highlighting the word on the page. All I have to do is click on the suggested spelling, and it will immediately update it. Okay. Now, if there were more errors, it would continue to each and every error until it's done reviewing the entire document. Once I made all my corrections, on this message here, I would click OK, and then I'm all set. Now, let me bring that back up for a second. Let me put in, just for 1 second, I'm going to add my name. Okay, I'm going to pretend that I spell my last name like this. Okay, so there's a red squiggly underline, which means Word thinks it's an error, which means when I run my spell check, it's going to show it to me as an error and suggest a different spelling. So, as I mentioned before, sometimes Word thinks words are errors, but they're not. This often happens with things like your last name, which is a unique word that's not in the dictionary, so Word just treats it as a spelling error, okay? It does happen with first names sometimes, but more often with last names. So, you have a few options here. Underneath the list of suggestions, you will see ignore once, ignore all, and add to dictionary. Okay, if I click ignore once, it will get rid of the red underline and move on to the next error, if any. If my last name showed up several times in this document, I could click on ignore all, and it would get rid of all those underlines in one click rather than having me go through each one individually, which obviously makes more sense. But perhaps the best option in this case is to go to add to dictionary. Your name, presumably you're going to be using it again and again in future documents. So you may as well just add your name to Word's dictionary. That way, it no longer flags it as an error in the future and just saves you the hassle of having to change it over and over again. Okay, or having to ignore it over and over again, I should say. All right, but in my case, I have added my name to the dictionary before, so it's actually in this list right here. And I should mention too that just like ignore all, there is a change all option. So if you click on the drop down next to a spelling suggestion, you'll see change all. So if you made a similar spelling, if you made the same spelling error several times, you can change them all with one click rather than doing them individually, just like we saw with ignore. Okay, but in this case, like I said, I'm just going to click on my name, suggestion, click OK, and now I'm all set. So I'm just going to go up and do one last save. And let's just talk about printing real quick, and then we're just going to go through some closing remarks for the class, and then we're all set. So to print, I go to my file menu. On the very left side, about halfway down, you'll see print. Okay, once upon a time, this would just do a quick print and just send it to the printer, but nowadays, it first takes you to a print preview. All right, so you can review it, make sure it looks good before you just go ahead and print. Okay, it's also not just for review purposes, it's also so you can make some adjustments. So for example, if I want to print out multiple copies of this document, let's say I want to print out 10 copies, I don't have to click print 10 times. I just go to copies and change that 1 to a 10. Okay, now let's say I only want to print out certain pages from this document. Let's say it's 10 pages long. I only want pages 1 through 5. Well, under settings down here, under print all pages, you'll see a pages box, and I can type in 1-5. Now we'll only print out pages 1 through 5 of my document. Again, we're just pretending it's 10 pages total. Another thing you can do is print out non-consecutive pages. So let's say I want pages 1, 4, and 7. I could put in 1, comma, space 4, comma, space 7, and it will print out only those 3 specific pages. All right, so just a few settings that that are good to know about. And a couple of these other things that you might be seeing, like orientation, margins, we're going to touch on these next week in Word Essentials. All right, but let me just erase what I have in this box here next to pages. And if I wanted to print this entire document, all I would have to do is click the print button here, and we're all set. And you, of course, always want to make sure that you're going to the right printer in case you have other printers hooked up to your computer. All right, and that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up my discussion for Introduction to Word. So the big takeaways here, remember the importance of that insertion point. It tells us where that change is going to be made, which means that sometimes we need to move it before we make a change, so we're doing it in the right place. Okay. Another important thing is that technique of selecting text. All right, get those mouse skills down. Make sure you're selecting text the right way. Oftentimes we need to do it in one motion by clicking, holding, and dragging and letting go, not till we're completely done selecting. All right, now in Word Essentials next week, we will kick things up a notch. We're going to have a document that's already created, but we're going to go in and make a whole bunch of changes to it. All right, so again, we're going to be doing this stuff a lot, selecting text. So make sure you practice, practice, practice. All right, so at this time, I'm going to end the recording, but I'm going to keep the class going, so bear with me 1 second.